I've decided to start a new life without you." The words hung in the air of the upscale restaurant where we had gathered to celebrate my daughter's college graduation. Gregory stood there with his champagne glass still raised. His announcement replacing the toast he was supposed to be making to Amelia. The clinking of silverware stopped, conversations froze mid-sentence. 50 pairs of eyes moved between him and me, waiting for tears, for shouting, for the dramatic scene everyone expected. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations on your honesty. My name is Bianca Caldwell. I am 54 years old, and until that exact moment, I had been playing the role of devoted wife flawlessly. I supported Gregory through 3 business ventures, to career changes, endless finding himself seasons. I managed the money when he lost it, stabilized things when he destabilized them, smoothed over every impulsive decision." Amelia sat beside me, still wearing her graduation cap, her face pale. This was supposed to be her day. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Cassandra Wells sitting at the back table. She wasn't hiding, she wasn't embarrassed, she looked almost relieved. That was new. Cassandra had attended our Christmas dinners, asked me for career advice, once cried in my kitchen about a bad breakup. Now she was sitting there like the guest of honor at my replacement ceremony. Interesting choice of timing, I thought, very theatrical. Gregory always did enjoy a stage. With respect, he continued, voice steady but rehearsed, "I believe it's time we both pursue happiness." Both. That word floated there awkwardly, because I hadn't known I was pursuing anything. The room stayed frozen. He expected me to crumble. He expected emotion. He expected to control the narrative. Instead, I reached calmly into my handbag and took out a cream-colored envelope, sealed, neat, intentional. I placed it beside his plate. "What's this?" he asked, smiling the way people do when they think they're winning. "Something you should have received this morning," I replied gently. His smile flickered, just slightly. I leaned toward Amelia and kissed her cheek. "I am so proud of you," I whispered. "Nothing changes that." Then I stood and faced the guests. "Please enjoy your lunch. Today is still about my daughter." My voice didn't shake. That surprised even me as I walked toward the exit. I could feel the shift behind me. Whispers starting, chairs scraping. Gregory calling my name. The heavy restaurant door closed behind me, cutting off the noise. Outside, the summer air hit my face. Warm, sharp, alive. Then I heard the door slam open again. "Bianca." "What is this?" Gregory's voice was no longer confident. He was holding the envelope now opened. Reading, processing, the color had drained from his face. "You had no right," he said quietly. I tilted my head. "No right. That's interesting." Because what Gregory didn't understand yet was that the envelope didn't just contain divorce papers. It contained evidence, documentation, and one detail he had completely forgotten about, a clause. A very specific clause, the kind that doesn't expire, the kind that doesn't forgive, the kind that turns public humiliation into a very private collapse. He thought he had chosen the perfect moment, a public setting, witnesses' pressure. He thought I wouldn't fight back in front of people. He was right. I didn't. I simply moved first. And Gregory had always been careless with timing. As he stood there on the sidewalk, gripping those papers, scanning the highlighted section again and again, I saw the exact second it hit him. The house, the accounts, the investments, the business shares, all of it suddenly looked fragile. "You planned this," he whispered. I met his eyes. "No, Gregory, you planned this." And for the first time in 28 years, he wasn't the one in control of the story. But what he still didn't know was that the real damage had already been done weeks earlier. The envelope was just the beginning. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't dramatic. There were no lipstick stains, no late-night confessions, no sudden coldness. It was a number, a small transfer, for $1,800. Not large enough to alarm most people, but I had managed our household finances for almost 30 years. I knew our patterns, and this one didn't belong. When I asked Gregory about it, he didn't hesitate. "Investment opportunity," he said lightly. "Short-term, high return." He kissed my forehead while saying it. That was his tell. Affection used as distraction. I didn't argue. I didn't push. I simply made a note of the date. 2 weeks later, another transfer, different amount, same destination account. That's when I checked more carefully. The account wasn't joint, it wasn't listed under our usual structures, it was new and private. I didn't confront him, not yet. Because something in his energy had shifted months earlier. He had started guarding his phone. Laughing quietly at messages, stepping outside to take calls. Subtle things, small enough to deny, large enough to feel. One night, he fell asleep on the couch with his phone still unlocked in his hand. I wasn't snooping. I was covering him with a blanket. The screen lit up when I touched it. A message preview appeared. I can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore, no name. Just a heart emoji. I stood there longer than I should have. Not crying. Just thinking. When you've been married almost 3 decades, you don't react immediately. You measure, you assess, you protect what needs protecting. The next morning, I acted exactly the same. Breakfast, coffee. A gentle reminder about Amelia's graduation dinner reservation. He looked relieved. That told me everything. Over the next few weeks, I watched. Transfers increased. Dinner receipts appeared from places we hadn't been. Jewelry charges. A deposit towards something labeled Coastal Holding. Coastal, that word stayed with me. We had once talked about retiring near the water, apparently. He had kept that dream, just not with me. I printed statements quietly at work, highlighted. Discrepancies, made copies. Every time I felt anger rising, I replaced it with calculation. Emotion is expensive. Documentation is powerful. Then one afternoon, I received a call on our home phone. A leasing office representative. She was confirming employment details for Gregory Caldwell and a co-applicant, female, mid-30s, move-in date scheduled 2 days after Amelia's graduation. 2 days. The timing was precise. That's when I understood the restaurant announcement wasn't spontaneous, it was staged. He wanted witnesses. He wanted control of the narrative. He wanted to look honest. Brave, liberated. I thanked the leasing agent calmly, told her there must be a misunderstanding. And I began preparing properly. That night, Gregory was unusually affectionate. He poured wine, asked about my day, told me he was proud of the life we'd built. I listened and realized something quietly devastating. He thought I trusted him completely. That was his greatest mistake. Over the next month, I did 3 things. I hired an attorney without telling him. I reviewed our prenuptial agreement line by line, and I read section 14 again, slowly, carefully. The fidelity clause, still active, still binding, still devastating if triggered correctly. Gregory had insisted on that clause when we were young, back when I had more family money than he did. He said it was about protection. Irony has a long memory. I didn't rush. I waited, gathered records, recorded financial inconsistencies, archived messages when opportunities appeared, not illegally, just carefully. By the time Amelia's graduation week arrived, I already knew where the money was, where the apartment was, where Cassandra fit into the picture, and exactly what he planned to say at that restaurant. What Gregory didn't know was that legal paperwork had been filed the morning before his announcement. He believed he was choosing the perfect moment. What he didn't realize was that the moment had already been chosen for him, and the envelope I handed him, that wasn't revenge, it was confirmation. But even then, there was one detail I hadn't anticipated, one thing that would make this far more complicated than a simple affair. I only discovered it the night before the hearing. And when I did, I understood this wasn't just betrayal, it was something much deeper, something that would change everything. The night before the preliminary hearing, I couldn't sleep, not because I was nervous, because something wasn't adding up. I had gone over every transfer, every receipt, every document. The apartment lease, the jewelry purchases, the private account, it all made sense. Too much sense. Gregory had always been impulsive, yes, but he wasn't reckless with paperwork, yet here he had been sloppy, traceable, almost careless. That bothered me more than the affair. So I went back one more time. I opened the folder I had labeled simply, MISC. It contained items I hadn't needed yet. Small things, odd things, things that didn't fit neatly into categories. And that's when I saw it. A wire transfer, large, much larger than the others. It wasn't recent. It had happened 11 months ago, almost a full year before the restaurant. The amount made my stomach tighten, not because of what it was, but because of where it went. It wasn't Cassandra, it wasn't the apartment, it wasn't coastal property. It was a business entity, One I recognized, because Gregory had once sworn never to be involved with them again. A manufacturing startup, one that had nearly bankrupted us 12 years ago. Back then, I had quietly used part of my inheritance to stabilize things. He promised me he would never risk our security like that again. I stared at the number for a long time. This wasn't romantic betrayal. This was financial betrayal, on a scale he hadn't mentioned. And suddenly, the timing of everything shifted in my mind. The apartment, the staged announcement, the fast exit plan. He wasn't just leaving me. He was preparing for something else, something expensive. I checked corporate filings. The business had recently expanded aggressively that required capital. A lot of it, and Gregory's name appeared, not publicly, but quietly, tied to an advisory position. Advisory, which meant liability. My breathing stayed steady, but inside, something cold settled. If the business failed again, and if his finances were entangled, and if we were still legally married, then I would be exposed, not just emotionally, legally, financially. Everything snapped into focus. The public announcement wasn't about humiliation, it was about timing. He needed the divorce narrative clean. He needed to separate before risk surfaced. He needed me out before consequences hit. And he believed he had structured it perfectly, but he had underestimated one thing: access. Because while he had been moving money quietly, I had been watching the accounts, all of them, including the ones he forgot were linked through legacy documentation. Old accounts, old permissions, old signatures he never thought to revoke. I made one phone call that night, to my attorney, then another, to a forensic accountant I had worked with years ago. By morning, we had enough to request a deeper financial review in court, not just about infidelity, about undisclosed liabilities. The hearing was no longer just about divorce, it was about protection. When I walked into that courtroom the next day, Gregory looked tired. But not afraid, not yet. He still thought this was about Cassandra, about embarrassment, about pride. He didn't know what I had discovered. He didn't know that I had quietly filed an addendum to freeze not only joint assets, but to request review of external business exposure tied to marital funds. When the judge asked about financial disclosures, Gregory's attorney answered confidently, "All required assets have been listed." I didn't react. I didn't need to, because my attorney stood calmly and handed over supplemental documentation. The room shifted, not dramatically. Just enough. Gregory's expression flickered. Confusion first, then calculation, then something else, recognition. He knew exactly which document had surfaced. He turned slightly toward me, and for the first time since the restaurant, he didn't look angry, he looked worried. Because now this wasn't about who he was leaving, it was about what he had risked, and if the court determined he had concealed financial exposure tied to marital assets, the fidelity clause would be the least of his problems. When the judge announced a full financial discovery review, Gregory's composure cracked. Just a little, enough for me to see it. Enough for him to understand. This was no longer his stage, and I wasn't reacting, I was protecting. But even then, I didn't yet know how deep the exposure went. That truth came 3 days later, in a phone call I almost didn't answer, and after that call, there was no turning back. The call came at 7:42 p.m. I remember the exact time because I almost let it go to voicemail. It was an unfamiliar number, Savannah area code. For a second, I assumed it was another client inquiry for my new consultancy draft. I had already begun sketching the business structure in my spare time. Even before everything exploded, I answered. "Mrs. Caldwell." The voice was formal, careful. "Yes, my name is Daniel Reeves. I'm calling regarding a secondary guarantor listing connected to Caldwell Advisory Holdings guarantor." That word slowed everything down. "I believe there may be an error," he continued. "Your name appears attached to a line of credit recently expanded." "Expanded? How much?" I asked. A pause, then the number, 7 figures. I didn't speak for several seconds, not because I was shocked, because I was calculating. "When was this executed?" I asked. "Approximately 9 months ago." 9 months, which meant he had done it while sitting across from me at dinner, while discussing retirement, while asking Amelia about her final semester. I thanked the man calmly, asked him to email documentation, hung up. Then I sat very still. Gregory hadn't just invested. He had leveraged. And he had used a legacy marital authorization clause that remained technically valid because I had never revoked it after his last failed venture. He hadn't forged my signature. He hadn't needed to. He had relied on something simpler, trust. I opened the prenup again, then our old business filings, then the updated credit agreements. It was subtle, almost elegant. If the startup succeeded, he would exit the marriage looking bold and independent. If it failed, the liability would partially touch me, unless we were legally separated before default. The restaurant announcement wasn't about humiliation, it was insulation. He was separating assets before exposure, and he believed I was unaware of the risk. For the first time since the affair, I felt something sharp, not rage, clarity. The next morning, I met with my attorney before work. We added another motion, request for emergency protective relief against undisclosed financial endangerment of marital estate. The language was dry, but the implication was heavy. If the court agreed that Gregory knowingly concealed material financial risk, the asset division could shift further, significantly further. At the second hearing, the judge reviewed the new filings. Gregory's lawyer looked blindsided. Gregory didn't, he knew. When the judge asked directly, Mr. Caldwell, did you expand a line of credit using marital standing without disclosure? His silence lasted too long. Silence in court is never neutral. It was strategic, he said finally. Strategic for whom? The judge asked. He glanced at me, then away. The forensic accountant submitted preliminary analysis, projected risk exposure, timeline overlap, intent inference. The judge's expression changed subtly, not anger, disapproval, the worst kind. Full discovery will include this venture, she said firmly. Any attempt to shield liability through separation timing will be evaluated. That was the moment Gregory understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a financial autopsy. After court, he followed me into the parking structure. You're overreacting, he said quietly. His tone had changed, less arrogance, more strain. You were going to leave me carrying exposure. I replied calmly. That's not fair. Is it accurate? He didn't answer. Instead, he said something that surprised me. I needed out, Bianca. Not from the marriage, from pressure, from aging, from feeling like the smaller partner, from watching me stabilize everything while he chased scale. It wasn't love that pulled him toward Cassandra. It was validation and risk. Risk made him feel young. I looked at him for a long moment. You could have left honestly, I said. He swallowed. I didn't think you'd let me. That was the closest he came to truth. Back at Diana's house that evening, I reviewed the updated financial projections. If the startup failed, exposure would be catastrophic. If it survived, Gregory might still walk away solvent. But now the court was watching, closely. 3 days later, the market shifted, unexpectedly, and the manufacturing startup's largest contract was suddenly under review, which meant liquidity pressure, which meant lenders would start examining guarantees. And when they did, they would see my name, unless something changed first, and I was already moving to make sure it did, because Gregory thought he had timed his exit perfectly. What he didn't realize was that markets don't care about timing, and neither do courts. The email arrived 2 days later, subject line, notice of review. I read it once, then again. The manufacturing company Gregory had quietly tied himself to had lost its primary overseas contract. Regulatory delays, funding gap, investors pulling back, liquidity risk, which meant lenders would start securing positions, which meant guarantors would be contacted, including me, unless the court intervened first. I forwarded the notice to my attorney immediately, within hours. We filed an emergency motion clarifying that any financial expansion Gregory executed without full disclosure should be considered unilateral risk assumption pending divorce finalization. Dry language, but powerful. By evening, Gregory called, not angry this time, breathless. Did you see the market news? He asked. Yes, it's temporary. Maybe. You filed something? He said, not a question. Yes. A long silence. You're trying to bury me? No, I replied evenly. I'm trying to prevent you from burying me. He exhaled sharply. You always assume the worst. No, I said, I assume patterns. Another silence. Then something cracked. You don't understand, he said quietly. If this collapses before I restructure, if it collapses, I interrupted gently. It collapses under your name, not mine. That was the first time he sounded afraid. Real fear, not embarrassment, not pride, fear of loss. The next morning, his attorney requested mediation, urgent, voluntary financial settlement discussion. Translation: he wanted to negotiate before discovery exposed everything publicly at mediation. Gregory looked thinner, less polished. Cassandra was not there. I noticed that immediately. He avoided eye contact at first, then leaned forward. If we settle privately, he said carefully, we can avoid dragging the business into court. I asked. He hesitated. I'll waive claim to the house, he continued quickly, and the investment portfolio, that was new. He hadn't offered that before. What about the guarantor exposure? I asked. He swallowed. I'll sign full indemnification, legally binding protection from business liability in writing, irrevocable. It was what I needed. But I didn't accept immediately. Because this wasn't just about safety, it was about structure. I want 80% of liquid joint assets, I said calmly. His lawyer stiffened. Gregory stared at me. That's excessive. No, I said quietly. It's insulation. The room went silent. I wasn't asking out of anger. I was pricing risk. After 4 hours of negotiation, he agreed. Full indemnification. House retained by me. 80% of liquid assets. Immediate separation of financial liability. His signature shook slightly when he signed. Not dramatically, just enough. As we stood to leave, he said something almost soft. You planned every move. No, I answered honestly. I responded to yours outside. Rain had started falling, light, steady, clean. By the end of that week, the startup's credit rating was downgraded, investors withdrew, and lenders activated review clauses. Gregory's indemnification agreement protected me completely. But it didn't protect him. 2 weeks later, Cassandra's social media photos changed. Different city, different man, no captions, just absence. Gregory called once more after that, not to argue, not to negotiate. Just silence on the line, then a quiet sentence. I miscalculated. Yes, I said. He didn't clarify which part. The affair? The announcement? The business gamble? Or me? It didn't matter. Because by then, the court had finalized asset division based on the mediated agreement, clean, contained, precise. He walked away with his business stake and personal account. I walked away insulated, stable, untouched by the collapse that followed. Within 3 months, the startup filed for restructuring, creditors circled, advisors resigned. Gregory's name appeared in industry columns, not as visionary, as cautionary. And the irony was quiet but absolute. The public announcement he staged to control the narrative became the timestamp of his decline. But the story wasn't over yet, because 6 weeks after finalization, something unexpected happened, something I hadn't planned for. And for the first time, I had to decide whether revenge was enough, or whether closure required something else. 6 weeks after everything was finalized, Gregory showed up at my door. He didn't call first. He didn't text. He just stood there. It was early evening. The light outside was soft. The kind of light that used to make our house feel warm. Now it just felt quiet. When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. Not physically, but structurally. The confidence was gone. The sharpness in his posture. The certainty. I won't come in, he said quickly. I just needed to talk. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Distance matters, he noticed. They've frozen the business accounts, he said. I waited. The restructuring didn't hold. I already knew that. Industry news travels fast. What do you need, Gregory? I asked calmly. He hesitated. And for the first time in almost 3 decades, he looked small. I need time, he said. For what? To stabilize. He still used corporate language when he was scared. You signed indemnification, I reminded him. I'm not asking about that. Then what are you asking? He exhaled slowly. There's a personal guarantee on a secondary facility. If I default, they'll come after everything left in my name. That's how guarantees work. I know. Silence stretched between us. The truth hovered there. He wasn't asking for money. He was asking for credibility. He wanted me to speak on his behalf to one of the lenders, because I still had reputation. Stability, professional standing. You want me to call someone, I said. He nodded. Just once. I studied his face carefully. This was the man who had staged a public exit to protect himself. The man who thought separating early would shield him from collapse. The man who underestimated me. And now he needed my voice. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked one question. If the business had succeeded, would you be standing here? He didn't lie. No, that honesty mattered more than anything else he had said. I nodded slowly. Then I can't help you. He swallowed. I thought you might say that. I'm not your shield anymore. His jaw tightened, but not in anger. Acceptance. I misread you. He said quietly, yes, and I misjudged the risk. Yes. Another silence. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not bitter, not defensive. Just tired. You always saw 5 steps ahead. He said, I thought that made you cautious. It made me prepared. He looked at the house behind me. The irony is, if I had just stayed steady, none of this would have happened. I didn't respond, because sometimes the truth doesn't need commentary. He shifted slightly. Cassandra left when the second downgrade hit. He said, I wasn't surprised. She said she didn't sign up for instability. There it was, the real wound. Not love, not betrayal. Ego, I hope you find what you're looking for, I said, and I meant it, because revenge had already happened. This wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about separation. He nodded, then paused. Amelia won't answer my calls. She needs time. Will she come around? I don't know. That was the only answer I could give. He stepped back from the porch for a moment. I saw flashes of the man I married, ambitious, charming, restless, but also impulsive and unwilling to sit with discomfort. He had tried to outrun aging, outrun stagnation, outrun fear. Instead, he ran straight into consequence. Goodbye, Bianca, he said finally. Goodbye, Gregory. I watched him walk to his car, not dramatically, just steadily. He didn't look back when I went inside. The house felt different, not heavy, not triumphant, just settled. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window. For months, I had been operating on strategy, defense, precision. Now there was space. And space can feel unfamiliar after chaos. 3 days later, I received something unexpected in the mail. Not a bill. Not a notice, a letter. Handwritten. From someone I hadn't heard from in years. And what it contained forced me to reconsider one final piece of the story. Not about Gregory. About myself. The letter was from Amelia. Her handwriting, messy as always, curling across the page with little urgency. Little ceremony, but every word carried weight. Mom, I've been thinking about everything. About Dad, about us, about me. I finally understand some things, and I think I understand you too. You've always been steady. You've always seen the path ahead. I never noticed it before, because I was living in my own chaos. But now, I do. Thank you for protecting me, for protecting yourself, for showing me that strength isn't loud, it's quiet. It's careful, and it's deliberate. I love you. I read it twice. Then I held it against my chest. I had spent months-long nights, endless calculations, meetings, calls, building a shield, not just for me, for Amelia, for our lives, and now, for the first time, it felt like I could put down the strategy, the courtroom victories, the indemnifications, the frozen accounts. All of it had been necessary, meticulous, almost surgical, but it hadn't been enough to make me feel complete, because revenge, as satisfying as it can be, rarely fills the spaces left by years of care, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the counter outside. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, warm, soft, indifferent. I realized that the story wasn't about Gregory anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming years I had given away, about seeing clearly what I deserved, about noticing the small victories, the ones that aren't dramatic, aren't public, but are real. I started drafting my next steps, not for revenge, not for survival, for life. A consultation for a new client, a call to a former colleague, a plan to expand Caldwell Financial Transitions, small, concrete actions, each one a step toward independence, mastery, and fulfillment. And in the back of my mind, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, calm satisfaction, because in the quiet aftermath, I realized the real power wasn't in the court filings, or in the frozen accounts, or even in the fallout that humbled Gregory. It was in the fact that I had remained myself, observant, steady, and unbroken, and that, in the end, no one could take away. The letter stayed on the counter. Amelia's words lingered in the room. Strength is quiet, revenge is methodical, closure is deliberate, and in that order, they are inevitable. I poured a glass of wine and leaned back in the chair. For the first time in a long time. I wasn't planning, I wasn't calculating. Gregory didn't collapse overnight. That would have been too easy at first. He tried to salvage his image. He gave interviews, blaming market volatility. He blamed miscommunication. A hostile domestic situation. He never used my name. But everyone knew the audit findings didn't scream fraud. They whispered negligence. Conflict of interest, risk concealment. Technically legal, ethically indefensible. Investors began withdrawing quietly. Board members stopped defending him. Invitations slowed, then stopped. What finally broke him wasn't a lawsuit. It was irrelevance. He wasn't indicted. Wasn't dragged away in handcuffs. He was simply removed, a mutual decision with the board, a structured exit, a carefully worded statement about transitioning leadership. The golden parachute he once bragged about, reduced, contingent, delayed, restructuring exposed true debt, his compensation package renegotiated under shareholder pressure, no prison. No screaming headlines, just a steady, humiliating erosion. I heard he downsized, sold the lake house, let 2 of the cars go. His circle shrank to people who still needed something. For the first time, Gregory lived within limits. That was the karmic math. Not destruction, adjustment 6 months later. I ran into him at a small, local charity event, the kind he once dismissed. He looked older, not physically broken, just diminished. When our eyes met, there was no rage in him, no accusation, just calculation. He approached me slowly. You planned it? He said quietly. I prepared, I corrected. He let out a dry laugh. You always were patient, and you always underestimated that for a moment. I saw something flicker in him. Not remorse, not fully, but recognition. You didn't ruin me. He said no. I replied evenly. You built something unstable. I just stepped out of the collapse. That was the truth, and I meant it without venom. Because here's what surprised me most. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy. I had redirected mine. Caldwell Financial Transitions was thriving now, not explosively, but steadily. Clients trusted me because I understood collapse. I understood quiet risk. I understood blind spots born of ego. Amelia had started graduate school. She called me more. Not out of need, but out of respect. The house felt lighter, so did I that night. After the event, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea instead of wine. The air was cool, still, and I realized something essential. Revenge had never been the point. Security was, autonomy was, dignity was. Gregory's consequence wasn't losing everything. It was losing control. Mine wasn't winning. It was remembering I had never been powerless. Some endings are loud. This one was quiet, and in that quiet, there was something better than revenge, peace.